All right, good afternoon. Welcome back here to Trader Minute. Great to have you aboard. Market's up about 35 points here on the S&P, and we have small caps and the Nasdaq both up about 1%, but lagging the S&P. That is a very interesting characteristic of today's market is that the S&P is the leading group. It's not the Nasdaq. It's not small caps here, and interesting. I don't know that the disparity is all that much to make too much out of it, but definitely something that from a bullish standpoint you'd rather see the other stack, but it's not stacked in a way that you look and go, wow, this is incredibly bearish. It's a market that was driven here by some reports, both from Bloomberg and CNBC, about how trade talks had been going a while back, and really not a whole lot of new about what's happening right here, right now. But it's enough to catalyze money into this market, and we've talked about this concept where if there's trade war resolution, this market's incredibly cheap. It's incredibly cheap. And if the trade war has a negative resolution and it gets ugly, the market's really expensive. It's really expensive. And it's this kind of dichotomy here that we just haven't seen in a long time. And, it's the reality of things. And so when there's some positive trade war talk or, hey, things are going to resolve, it leads to some money having to come into the market because of that element of how cheap the market really is. If there is resolution. Now, for the challenge, I'm, personally, and I've been asked this a few times, personally, yesterday and today, I've trimmed a lot of my upside exposure. And not necessarily because I'm uber bearish or anything like that, but market's pushing into an overbought area, pushing into, what I expect to be a little bit of resistance. And I would not be surprised to see some down, come into play. As I mentioned yesterday, I did put a little bit of money into a SPY put spread. I am debating adding to that here today. We'll see. But overall, my positioning has changed pretty dramatically here today, more dramatically than it has any time since back here when we saw the market vibe turn bullish. So it's, we don't have the market vibe turning bearish or anything like that, but it's one of those where I kind of look at this and I go, okay, if the market just goes vertical from here, right, that could happen. I'll be on the sidelines and, I'll go, that stunk, right? But the odds don't favor that. The odds favor a little bit of basing or a little consolidation, a higher low coming in. And so, I'm looking to play some of those odds, more than anything. And, even if we don't get any kind of major pullback, I do think with a lot of stocks, it's going to be, there'll be plenty of add opportunities from an investor standpoint, right? Now, from an individual trade standpoint and challenge standpoint here, being where I'm at in the challenge, I have to make sure my next trade really is pretty darn good. Where the odds are in my favor, I can't go out and say, well, I want something that absolutely is going to go this way, right? It's just not very feasible. But I need something where the odds are significantly greater in my favor. And when I narrowed the odds down like that, the number of opportunities diminishes dramatically, right? And so as I kind of look around things here today, we have some interesting stuff and some stuff that I go, I really like the action on it, and it's something where where I have no problem buying it. Do I want to chase it though, right? Or do I want to kind of wait for a little cool? And what's the risk in waiting? Well, you miss on out. Well, one of them's Micron, and here's Micron making that snap back above the 7-day moving average today. Nice little 3-7 crossover here on it. And this is one that gave me a buy signal this morning. I looked at it, I watched it, and I was contemplating, and then the news hit, and I'll show you kind of what happened this morning. It just, it just kind of made this move up over 35, kind of hung out. Then the news hit, and since then he's pretty much been just drifting sideways to down. But missed an opportunity here this morning, arguably there to jump in. But Western Digital here as well. Which I talked about yesterday. This has had a monster move here today. And, this is one of those stocks that I mentioned this morning. When we look at the news, we look at the, what has transpired over the last 2 days. If there's trade war resolution, it's a big benefit to Western Digital. It's a big benefit to them. And it's just a stock that's absolutely dirt cheap from a fundamental standpoint. So I like the price action on both. Both have 3-7 crossover action. Good volumes associated. I've looked at the option pricing. It's not terrible. It's not, uber terrific, but it's not terrible. And I think I'm going to wait until Monday to look to enter in. I do have some concerns about the close of the market today and the gap over the weekend. But we'll take a look at it Monday, and if we do see things, holding up, we'll look to jump into that early. Now, we have a lot of other stocks with some 3-7 crossover action on them here today. Martin Marietta, MLM, Vulcan Materials, VMC. Both of these coming off of higher lows and snapping up and snapping into this very nice bullish position. Now, I've traded Martin, I've traded Vulcan many, many times over my trading career. It is very difficult to buy them on the trigger days, just because the next day is almost always down. A lot of times they give nice trigger days, and then they just have this kind of low volume down that comes into them, and that's the opportunity to purchase or buy them. So these are on my radar here for Monday. You can throw Masco into that group here. We've talked about Masco a few times, but always some nice action on them today. Estee Lauder, similar type of action, and it's one of those where I know a lot of people, they look at the market, they go, oh man, I missed out. I can't, I didn't get the bottom, and with some stocks, yeah, you probably missed out, right? But if the market is truly bullish and going to continue, there's going to be signals like this continuing to come in, and stocks that will, kind of follow through. We'll see investors continue to step in, and it's going to be highly differential, and they'll start to pick up some of these names that they, weren't willing to pick up, right away. Estee Lauder with some nice signal here today. CF Industries, with a nice little signal on it here today, and then some consumer staples names with some 3-7 crossovers on them. Now, something like a Procter & Gamble has a 3-7 crossover, but it's still in a very strong consolidation stage rather than a trend stage. Same with Coca-Cola here, same with Clorox. So, we do see that coming in, but this is an area that I think is very well worth watching going into next week. I would not be surprised if we see a little money rotate into these names early on next week after what we've seen. We've seen here this week. There have been some other stocks, that have had small pullbacks here and there, but they continue to just get bought up very quickly. The General Motors of the world, FCXs of the world, other stocks that, nice reversals yesterday, nice continuations here today with earnings upcoming, but just not really great risk-reward scenarios on them. It's one of those with Caterpillar. If I go and buy an option, and let's just say Caterpillar opens down $2 on Monday, is this still in a bullish position? Oh, yeah, it is. Would that feel too good on my option? No. So I need a little bit better risk-reward scenario there with it. But anyway, those are some of the things that are on my radar, along with some of the stocks that have either already reported earnings or who I think going into earnings, the bar is just so low that they could have some negative earnings or they could have some bad earnings and still go higher. Johnson & Johnson reports early next week. And, breaking out into a new short-term high here today, still has not recovered from this drop, and I don't expect it to fully recover from this drop. But, we even talked about this drop back here, that this is probably something that's kind of a one-off. It happens, it'll be done, and it's not going to linger with the company for years, right? It could linger for just a little short term, but this is one where I would not be surprised to see the earnings come out and investors go, oh, okay, all right, everything's still really good here, and see this thing trade up into the 135, 137 area here on earnings next week. The options aren't great, but they're not horrid, they're not terrible, in any way, shape, or form there. So, those are on my radar. I haven't made any decisions about if I'm going to, if I'm going to enter anything into the close here today. Still think it's a little early. I do want to see the close, and the bottom line is if things get bought up into the close, I'll probably be a little more apt to say, hey, you know what, I want to go and short the market. Where if things sell off into the close, it's probably an opportunity to pick something up, that is pulled back here just a little bit. But some of the signals here: Micron, Western Digital, Estee Lauder, Vulcan Materials, Martin Marietta. Those have some pretty good risk-reward scenarios on them. If they open flat to slightly down here on Monday without, a major market gap, and we'll be looking at those, definitely early on, and looking to take advantage there. Another group that I think is in for some heavy selling is the utility group. This is one where I think investors are a little overexposed, a little too much there, where they're going to have to start stripping money out of there and allocating it elsewhere if if there is positive trade war resolution. We've seen some examples of some of that hefty selling come in and how quick it can be. But, so far I don't think we're talking about any kind of massive breakdown, associated here with it. And then last but not least here, U.S. Steel, which has held up really well today despite, what we talked about earlier today with, anyway, you can go back and replay it. But, this is one where, man, the earnings are very tempting to play. They're very tempting to play given how cheap the stock is fundamentally. And, the earnings are on the 30th, so they're not right away here. And it is something where, can I go and buy the 21s here for February 1st and do pretty well? Well, potentially can do really, really well. So definitely have my eye on them, and we'll look to trade those. So again, I haven't made any decisions going into the close today. I will kind of keep that posted into the log there, and obviously if I do go enter something, you'll get a trade alert there on it. But those are some of the things that I'm looking at, some of the things that I really like out there, and that kind of have my radar. I don't think there's anything. Well, so far there's nothing where I look and go, man, these odds, they're up in the 80-90% area where I'd like them to be. U.S. Steel probably one of the better odds from just a pure chart dynamic standpoint. So a really nice one, but overall it's one where we're talking about 65 to 70%, which is pretty decent for an option trade in terms of odds. So maybe the best that I have going into the close, and I may just look to take that and run and take that and go and make that happen. All right. Thanks for hopping on. Have yourselves a great one, and we'll talk to you later. Take care.